I overheard my wife telling a friend that she regretted settling for me, and later, it seemed like karma came back around in some way. To give you some context, I'm a 26-year-old man, and my wife, Emma, is 24. We've been together for a few years and married for only 3 months. Things have been going fairly smoothly, at least. That's what I believed. We had our usual ups and downs, nothing too serious, and I thought everything was fine. Then, one night, something happened that completely turned my world upside down. I wasn't intentionally eavesdropping, but I overheard Emma talking on the phone as I passed by our bedroom. I didn't mean to listen, but sometimes you unintentionally catch pieces of a conversation, right? This was one of those times, and what I heard has been playing over and over in my mind since then. Emma was talking to one of her closest friends, I couldn't tell who, but it sounded like a deep, serious discussion, the kind where someone's venting about life. I was about to keep walking. But then I heard my name, which made me stop briefly, because who wouldn't? Hearing your own name in a private conversation naturally sparks curiosity, even if you didn't intend to eavesdrop. Emma said, "Don't just settle for anyone. That's the mistake I made with Michael." My heart dropped. It felt like a punch to the gut. She went on, saying he was my last option, and look where that's gotten me. I froze in place, unable to believe what I'd just heard. My wife, the woman I thought was happy with me, was saying I was her last resort. I couldn't process it right away. It was as if my brain was overloaded. How do you even respond to something like that? My first instinct was to go in and demand an explanation, but I didn't. I'm not sure why. Maybe I was just too stunned, or maybe I didn't want to hear anything else. So I walked away. The rest of the night, I couldn't think of anything else. I tried to act normal around Emma, but it was impossible. Every time I looked at her, those words echoed in my mind, last resort. It felt like they were seared into my brain. I kept asking myself how long she'd felt this way. Had she always seen me like this? Had I been completely unaware? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying that conversation again and again. Part of me wanted to believe I'd misheard or misunderstood her, but deep down I knew I hadn't. There was no other way to interpret it. The thing is, I'd never seen any hint of this before. Emma always seemed happy, or at least content. Sure, we had our occasional arguments, who doesn't? But there was nothing that suggested she felt trapped or that she'd settled for me. It's not like she was pressured into this marriage. We were together for quite some time before we got married. We discussed our future, our dreams, even having kids someday. None of it ever seemed forced or insincere, at least not to me. As I lay there that night, my mind began to spiral. What if she'd always felt this way and just never expressed it? What if every "I love you" we shared was just her going through the motions? I felt like a fool, recalling all the times I thought we were genuinely happy and wondering if, for her, it was all just an act. Then, another thought struck me. What if there was someone else? She had mentioned settling for me, so who's to say there wasn't someone she truly wanted to be with? Maybe even someone she still thinks about. That idea made me feel sick, but once it was there, I couldn't let it go. By morning, I was completely exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Emma woke up looking cheerful as usual, as if nothing had happened. I tried to keep my composure, but inside I was a wreck. I couldn't bring myself to confront her right away. I needed time to think about what to say and how to approach the situation. But every moment I stayed silent felt like it was suffocating me. All day I kept watching her, analyzing her every move. Was she texting someone else? Did she seem distant? Was she hiding something? I started feeling paranoid, like I was losing my grip on reality. But hearing your partner say you were their last choice messes with your mind in ways you wouldn't expect. I even thought about talking to one of my friends, but I felt too embarrassed. What would I say? Hey, I overheard my wife say I was her last resort. What should I do? It sounded ridiculous, like something out of a bad drama. Plus, I didn't want to make Emma look bad in front of my friends if this turned out to be something we could work through. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became that I couldn't just ignore it. This was too big to let slide. As the day went on, my anxiety kept building. I knew I had to talk to her, but I was terrified of what I might hear. What if she confirmed everything? What if she admitted she didn't truly love me? Or worse, what if she just brushed it off like it didn't matter? The idea of confronting her made my heart race, but I knew avoiding it wouldn't make it go away. By the time evening rolled around, I had made up my mind I had to bring it up, no matter how hard it might be. So after dinner, I casually said, "Hey, we should talk later." She looked a little surprised, but just nodded, not knowing that this conversation would change everything. After overhearing Emma call me her last resort, my mind was in turmoil. I couldn't let go of those words, no matter how much I tried to tell myself it might not be as bad as it sounded. The next day, everything felt different. I began noticing little things I hadn't paid attention to before, or maybe I just didn't want to see them. Emma was acting somewhat off. She still smiled and said all the right things, but something about her demeanor seemed strained, as if she were trying a little too hard to act normal. Or maybe I was just imagining it because of what I'd overheard. Either way, the tension was there, even if neither of us mentioned it. That morning, as we had breakfast, I kept glancing at her. She was scrolling through her phone like usual, but every now and then I noticed her typing quickly, then deleting and retyping. I don't know why, but a wave of discomfort washed over me. Trying to sound casual, I asked, "Who are you texting?" Emma looked up, a bit startled, as if she hadn't expected me to notice. "Oh, just a friend," she replied, her tone sounding a bit too relaxed. "You don't know her then." She went right back to her phone. Although this wasn't unusual for her, everything now felt suspicious. I didn't press her, I just nodded and acted like it didn't bother me, but inside it did. All day I kept replaying the words she'd said the night before. Was she texting the same friend she had been talking to on the phone, or was it someone else? My mind spun with countless scenarios, none of them good. I kept wondering, what if she was hiding something? What if this went beyond her feeling she'd settled for me? Later that afternoon, I noticed her on her phone again, this time with a smile. But it wasn't the kind of smile you'd expect when chatting with a friend about something funny. It seemed more personal. Unable to help myself, I asked, "What's so funny?" She quickly looked up, locking her phone and saying, "Oh, nothing. Just a meme," but something in her voice made me feel like she was trying to keep me from probing further. That was when the real doubt began to creep in. Was there someone else? Was she still in touch with an ex or someone from her past? I didn't want to be the paranoid husband who questions everything, but after what I'd overheard, I couldn't help it. Every tiny detail felt like it hinted at a bigger secret. The strangest part was how normal she acted otherwise, as if nothing had changed. We went about our day as usual, running errands, making dinner, watching TV together, but this invisible tension seemed to linger between us, at least for me. I don't know if she noticed it or if she was just that skilled at pretending. At one point, we were sitting on the couch watching a show, and she leaned over to rest her head on my shoulder. It felt nice, but it also felt wrong. How could she be so affectionate after what she'd said? Did she even mean it, or was this just her way of pretending everything was okay? I wanted to bring it up right then, but I couldn't find the right words. What if I was overreacting? What if I'd misunderstood her conversation? But no matter how much I tried to rationalize, I kept coming back to that one line: "Michael" was my last resort. It wasn't just about the words, it was the way she'd said them without hesitation, without a hint of humor. It felt genuine, and that's what hurt the most. By the end of the day, I was mentally drained. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, questioning every little thing she did or said. I needed to confront her, but struggled to find the right moment. Every time I thought about bringing it up, a knot formed in my stomach. What if our conversation went worse than I'd imagined? What if she confirmed all my worst fears? As we got ready for bed, Emma seemed entirely unaware of the turmoil inside me. She kissed me goodnight and quickly fell asleep, while I lay wide awake, my mind racing with a million thoughts. I began thinking back to all the moments in our relationship when I might have missed signs. Were there times she seemed distant, but I dismissed it as her having a rough day? Had there been moments where she hinted at unhappiness, but I'd been too blind to see it? And then the haunting thought crept in: what if she was comparing me to someone else, someone she saw as better? The idea of being someone's backup plan, the person they settled for, because they couldn't have the one they truly wanted, made me feel physically ill. I stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, trying to figure out what to do. I knew I couldn't live with this doubt forever, but I also didn't want to bring it up in the middle of the night. I needed to pick the right time and find the right words, but most importantly, I had to be ready for whatever she might say. Deep down, I realized that once I opened this door, there would be no going back. After days of feeling like my head was going to explode from all the overthinking, I finally decided I couldn't take it anymore. I had to talk to Emma. How could I just sit on something like that, knowing my wife saw me as a last resort? It was tearing me apart, and I knew if I didn't bring it up, I'd probably go insane. That morning, we were both home. I tried to act normal, even though I felt like my heart was pounding out of my chest. We had breakfast together, but I couldn't even taste my food. I just kept staring at her, trying to find the right way to start the conversation. Every time I opened my mouth, though, I chickened out. Finally, I couldn't hold it in any longer. After we finished eating, I took a deep breath and said, "Hey, Emma, we need to talk." She looked up from her phone, a little surprised, but she didn't say anything. I gestured for us to sit in the living room. We settled on the couch, and the tension between us was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Emma looked at me, her face showing a mix of curiosity and concern. I could tell she was trying to figure out what was coming. "Okay," I started, working to keep my voice steady. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." She nodded, staying silent. I took another deep breath and just went for it. "A few nights ago, I overheard you talking on the phone with a friend. You said something about settling for me, and that I was your last resort." Her eyes widened, and for a moment she didn't say anything. It was like time had stopped, and I was just sitting there bracing myself for the worst news. Finally, she let out a nervous laugh, the kind people make when they're caught off guard. "Wait, you heard that?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Yeah," I replied, trying to stay calm. I heard everything. She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with her fingers. "Michael, I didn't mean it like that. I was just talking with my friend. It was a stupid thing to say." "Stupid," I repeated, feeling my frustration grow. "Emma, you said I was your last resort. That's not just a careless remark, that's devastating." She sighed, rubbing her temples as if she was trying to find the right words. "I was just venting, okay? It wasn't meant seriously. Sometimes people say things in the heat of the moment that don't mean anything." "Don't mean anything," I replied sharply. "Emma, those words don't just slip out by accident. You don't casually tell someone you settled for your husband unless there's some truth to it." She looked at me, her eyes showing a blend of guilt and frustration. "It's not like that, Michael," she said. "I was talking about how everyone feels pressure to get married and settle down." I don't know, just venting about life." "But why make it about us?" I asked, my voice rising. "If you were just venting, you could have said anything else. Why did it have to be about settling for me?" Emma shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "I didn't mean it that way, Michael. I really do love you. I was just feeling stressed, and it came out wrong." I wanted to believe her. I truly did, but something didn't sit right, like there was more she wasn't saying. "Emma, I need to know. Do you actually feel like you settled for me, like I was your last option?" She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked down, avoiding my eyes. The silence was overpowering, and each passing second felt like an eternity. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know." That hit me like a punch to the gut. "You don't know?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "What does that even mean?" "It means I don't always know how I feel," she said, her voice trembling. "I love you, but sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, not because of you, but because of me. I'm scared I rushed into this, and now I don't know how to fix it." I leaned back on the couch, trying to take it all in. Part of me was angry, but another part just felt sadness, like all the air had left the room. "So what now?" I asked, barely able to speak. "What are we supposed to do with this?" Emma wiped her eyes, sniffling. "I don't know," she said again. "I didn't want to hurt you. I never meant for this to happen." We sat there in silence for what felt like forever, neither of us knowing what to say or where to go from here. All I knew was that our marriage was now on shaky ground, and I wasn't sure if we could repair it. After our talk, everything felt as if it were hanging by a thread, tense, awkward, and exhausting. We barely spoke for the rest of the day. It felt like we both needed space, but neither of us dared to say it. Every little thing felt heavy, like we were walking on eggshells around each other. The next morning, nothing had improved. We went through our regular routines: breakfast, getting ready for the day, but it felt like we were on autopilot. I couldn't shake what she'd said. "I don't know." Those 3 words kept looping in my head. It felt like a death sentence for our marriage, yet it left everything so unresolved, without closure. Emma was quieter than usual too. Normally she's the one to keep the conversation going, but now she seemed lost in her own thoughts. I noticed her glancing at her phone often, probably texting that same friend. I didn't have the energy to ask. I was too drained to care at that point. By the afternoon, I couldn't stand the silence anymore. I needed to get out. I told Emma I was going for a walk, and she just nodded, not even looking up from her phone. That stung more than I expected. I wandered around for a while, trying to clear my mind, but no matter how far I walked, I couldn't escape the storm inside me. When I got back, Emma was still on the couch, still on her phone. Seeing her like that made something snap inside me. I blurted out, "We need to figure this out. We can't keep pretending everything's fine." She looked up, startled. "I know," she said quietly. "I just don't know where to start by being honest with me," I replied, my voice more forceful than I intended. "Do you even want to be in this marriage? Because right now it feels like you're already checked out." She bit her lip, clearly struggling with her response. "Michael, I don't want to hurt you, but I feel so confused. I thought getting married would make things clearer, but it's only made me realize how unsure I am." That felt like another blow. "So what are you saying? You want out?" "I don't know," she repeated, and it felt like I was going in circles. "I just need time to figure out what I really want." Time, that's always the answer, isn't it? I said, frustration bubbling up. But time isn't what I need. I need answers. I need to know if we have a future, or if I'm holding on to something that's already gone. Emma looked away, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't know what you want me to say, Michael. I'm scared. I don't want to make the wrong choice." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "And what about me? Do you think this is easy for me? I'm sitting here questioning everything about our relationship, wondering if you ever truly loved me, or if I was just the guy you settled for because you didn't want to be alone." Her head snapped up. "That's not fair. I do love you, Michael. I'm scared I rushed into this. Then, why didn't you say something before we got married?" I asked, feeling frustration take over. "You had every chance to call it off if you weren't sure." "Because I thought I could make it work," she admitted. "I didn't want to disappoint you. I didn't want to be alone there." It was the truth I'd been dreading but half expected. She had stayed with me out of fear, not love, and now we were both paying for it. We sat in silence for a long time after that, each of us lost in thought. I didn't know what to say anymore. What do you even say to someone who's just told you they're unsure about wanting to be with you? Eventually, Emma spoke up. "Maybe we need some space, just for a little while, to think things through." Space, I repeated, almost laughing at the irony. "We've been living in the same house, but we've already been worlds apart for days. What difference would more space make?" She didn't have an answer, and honestly, neither did I. We were stuck in this strange limbo, and it was tearing us both apart. That night we slept in the same bed, but it felt like we were miles apart. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how we got to this point, wondering if there was any way to fix it, or if this was the beginning of the end. I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter what we decided, things would never be the same again. After everything, I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't stay stuck in this limbo forever. Emma's uncertainty, her "I don't know about our marriage," felt like a slow-acting poison, gradually breaking me down, and if I didn't act soon, it would destroy me. I had to take charge of my life, even if that meant leaving the woman I'd once believed was my forever. The next morning, I woke up feeling more resolute than I had in days. Emma was still asleep, curled up peacefully on her side of the bed, as if none of this was weighing on her like it was on me. Maybe it wasn't. Perhaps she'd already mentally checked out, leaving me clinging to something that no longer existed. I got up quietly, went to the living room, and sat there thinking about what life would look like without her. It was terrifying, yes, but the more I considered it, the more I realized I'd been living in fear for too long: fear of losing her, fear of being alone, fear of starting over. But maybe, just maybe, being alone would be better than staying as someone's last resort. I spent the day gathering my thoughts, figuring out exactly what I wanted to say. I wasn't going to let this drag on any longer. We needed to have a real conversation, one free of half-truths and I don't knows. That evening after dinner, I asked her to sit down. "Emma, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my tone calm but firm. She looked at me, her face serious. "Okay," she replied. I took a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about everything that's happened, and I can't keep living like this. I need to know if we're going to fix this or if it's time to move on." Emma looked down, toying with the edge of her sweater. "I've been thinking too," she said softly, "and I don't think I can give you the answer you're looking for." I nodded, half expecting this response, though it still stung. "Then I think it's best if we go our separate ways," I said, my voice slightly trembling. I love you, Emma, but I can't stay in a marriage where I'm not someone's first choice. I deserve more than that. She started to cry, and for a moment I felt like the bad guy, but I knew this was the right choice. Staying together out of fear or guilt wouldn't be fair to either of us. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered through her tears. I know, I said, and I don't want to hurt you either, but sometimes the best thing we can do is let go. We sat in silence for a while, each trying to process what was happening. It felt surreal, as if I were watching someone else's life fall apart, but it was my life, and I had to own it. The next few days were tough as we began the process of separating, sorting out who would keep what and how we'd handle the logistics of our split. It was awkward and painful, but it was also necessary. Every step we took felt like another weight lifting off my shoulders, even though it hurt deeply. One night, as I packed up my things, Emma came into the room. Michael, she said quietly, I hope you find someone who makes you happy, someone who can be everything you need. I looked at her, feeling a pang in my chest. I hope you find that too, I said. And that was it. No dramatic farewells, no long speeches, just two people realizing that sometimes love isn't enough, and it's okay to let go. After Emma moved out, I turned my focus inward. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in a while, threw myself into work, and started rediscovering who I was outside of our marriage. It wasn't easy, and there were days when I missed her so much it physically hurt, but I knew I was doing the right thing. A few weeks after she left, I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone, when I stumbled upon an old photo of us. We looked so happy, so in love. For a moment, I felt a pang of regret, wondering if there was more I could have done to save us. But then I remembered all the pain, the doubt, and I realized that sometimes the best thing you can do is let go. I'm not saying I have it all figured out. I'm still healing, still trying to figure out what comes next, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. I know I deserve someone who sees me as their first choice, someone who loves me without hesitation or doubt, and I'm willing to wait for that. Moving forward isn't easy, but it's necessary, and I'm ready to take that step. Update 1. It's been about a month since Emma and I decided to split. It hasn't been easy, but I've been doing my best to move on. I focused on work, caught up with friends, and tried to find some sense of normalcy in this mess. I thought I was making progress. I was beginning to feel like myself again. But then life threw me another curveball. One day, I was hanging out with a friend, catching up, talking about random things, when he casually dropped a bomb. Hey, did you know Emma's dating someone? He asked, like it was no big deal. I almost choked on my drink. Wait, what? Already, I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Yeah, he replied, looking a bit uncomfortable. I saw her at a coffee shop with a guy the other day. They looked close. My heart sank. I knew we were done, but hearing she was already seeing someone hit me harder than I expected, especially since we weren't even divorced yet. The paperwork was still being finalized, and here she was, moving on as if it meant nothing. I tried to act unaffected, pretending it didn't bother me. Do you know who the guy is? I asked, attempting to sound casual. He hesitated for a second. I think it's that guy she used to talk about before you two got married, the one she had some history with. And then it all clicked: the constant texting, the odd behavior, her being glued to her phone during those last few weeks. It wasn't just her being distant, it was him. She'd been talking to this guy the whole time, even before we decided to split. I didn't say much after that. I just nodded and changed the subject. But inside, I was fuming. I felt betrayed all over again, not because she was seeing someone that was her choice, but because of the timing. It felt like our entire marriage had been a joke to her, like she'd had one foot out the door long before we even said goodbye. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I replayed every moment from our last month together, every time she was on her phone, every time she brushed off my questions. It all made sense now. She hadn't just been distant, she'd already checked out, her focus on someone else. The next morning, I decided I needed to confront her, not because I wanted to get back together, but because I needed closure. I needed to hear it directly from her, to understand why she couldn't just be honest with me. From the beginning, I messaged her, asking if we could talk. She agreed, and we met up at a park later that day. It felt strange seeing her again, especially knowing what I knew now. She looked anxious, as if she sensed what was coming. Emma, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. She nodded silently. I heard you've been seeing someone, I said. watching her reaction closely. Is it true? Her eyes widened for a moment. Then she looked away. Yes, she admitted softly, I've been seeing someone. Is it the same guy you were talking to before we separated? I asked, already certain of the answer, but needing to hear it from her directly. She hesitated, then nodded. Yes, it's him. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. So you were talking to him this entire time? I asked. Even while we were trying to work things out, she lowered her head, guilt clear on her face. I didn't plan for it to happen this way, she said. We started talking again, and it just felt right, I echoed, my voice rising. Emma, we were still married. We were supposed to be working on us, and you were already moving on with someone else. I know, she replied, her voice trembling. I'm sorry, Michael. I didn't want to hurt you. Hearing her apology didn't bring me any comfort. If anything, it only made me angrier. If you were talking to him all along, why didn't you just tell me? Why drag this out? I didn't know how to, she admitted. I was scared. I didn't want to hurt you more than I already had. Well, congratulations, I said bitterly. You managed to do that anyway. We sat in silence for a while, neither of us knowing what to say. I wanted to shout, to let out all my anger at her selfishness, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. The damage was done, and there was no going back. Finally, I stood up. I hope he's worth it, I said coldly. I hope you're happy with him, Michael, she began, but I cut her off. I don't want to hear it, I said. Just finish the divorce papers, and let's be done with this. I walked away, feeling a strange combination of relief and sadness. I was finally finished with Emma, but the sting of betrayal was still fresh. It would take time to heal, but at least now I knew the truth. Moving forward wouldn't be easy, but at least I could do it without looking back. Update 2. It's been a few weeks since I confronted Emma about seeing that guy, and honestly, I thought I was done with all the drama. The divorce papers were still in process, but I'd been keeping my distance from her and focusing on rebuilding my life. Things were slowly improving. I was starting to feel like myself again, even if the whole situation left a bitter taste in my mouth. Then, one evening, I got a message from Emma. Just seeing her name on my phone made my stomach turn. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. Her message was brief and vague. Can we talk? It's important. I rolled my eyes, thinking, what now? Part of me wanted to ignore her, but another part was curious about what she could possibly want after everything. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her the next day. When we met at a coffee shop, Emma looked awful. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying for days. She was fidgeting, barely able to look me in the eye. I didn't feel sympathy, though all I could think about was how much she'd hurt me and how I wasn't going to let her back into my life. Michael, she started, her voice shaky. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to tell you something. I folded my arms, leaning back in my chair. What is it, Emma? She took a deep breath, tears forming in her eyes. The guy I was seeing. He was cheating on me. He was with another girl the whole time we were together. I blinked, taken aback, and said nothing, just letting her continue. I found out a few days ago, she went on, her voice breaking. I confronted him, and he admitted it. He didn't even try to deny it. I feel so stupid, Michael. I left you, and for what? For someone who didn't even care about me. She started crying, covering her face with her hands. I sat there, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and indifference. This was karma, plain and simple. She had betrayed me for a guy who turned out to be a player, and now she was facing the consequences. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I made such a huge mistake. I thought I wanted something else, but I see now how wrong I was. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I had to tell you. I waited a moment, letting her cry, then said, Emma, I appreciate you telling me the truth, but it doesn't change anything. She looked up, her eyes pleading. Michael, I know I messed up, but can't we at least try to fix things? I still love you. I realize now that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. I shook my head. Emma, you didn't love me. You loved the idea of not being alone. When things got tough, you ran to someone else. I can't be with someone who only comes back when things don't work out with someone else. She reached across the table, trying to grab my hand, but I pulled away. Please, Michael, she whispered, give me another chance. I'll do anything to make it right. I stood up, my voice firm. Emma, it's too late. I've moved on, and you need to do the same. I deserve someone who chooses me first, not someone who settles or only comes back when things go wrong. Her face crumpled. and she began to cry again, but I didn't feel sorry for her. This was her mess, not mine. I'm sorry, Emma, I said, softer this time. But we're done. I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving her there in tears. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders for the first time in months. I felt free. Emma's betrayal had been a painful chapter in my life, but now it was finally closed. Karma had done its work, and I was ready to move forward for real.